I'm Lisa Zufall with Idea2Launch, and
I am Sarah Wick with Idea2Launch.
we're here today with Ian Levitt from
Of
Studio Americana.
Yes. Thank
and
you.
we are going to learn more about this wonderful studio and how it even got started.
Yeah.
And I know Sarah and I are really excited to be here and start our podcast with you
Yeah.
because the studio is gorgeous.
Thank you.
You put a lot of work into it.
I did. And to be honest with you, I continue thinking about the things I still have left to do. But yeah, I put this together over, the plan has been in the works for about a year and a half, but I physically put this together. I started, I want to say, late February, and then we had our private open house, which you were at April 30th. And so we got the lion's share done in that period. And through knowing a lot of people that I've networked with over my years in radio and TV, I just happen to know a lot of the right people, engineers, custom designers for tables like this and stuff like that. So it was, this couldn't have possibly happened if it wasn't for all the people I already knew. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
So tell us more about your background in radio and TV. Well, I know, but these guys don't know.
Sure. Well, I started as a country radio DJ at the age of 15. I was actually an on-air radio guy at that age, and it was just a crazy, surreal experience. And then just kind of continued down that road. I did music radio for about 10, 12 years, and then I moved into...
Wait, how did you even get a gig doing radio at 15?
I walked into a radio station, and I just asked what I could do to be involved and if they had opportunities. And I said, I'm willing to do whatever shifts you have. I'd just love to get into something like this. I remember my dad had told me a few days before that, you're 15 now, you got to get a job beyond being a paper boy. So
those parents.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, that was just the thing. And I would say that is kind of something I have learned throughout the career is if you don't go for it, if you don't ask for things, you don't get them.
Right.
And,
Amen.
And, it's nobody likes being rejected or being told no, and everybody goes
But it's always
through
a no
that.
if you don't ask.
Absolutely. So I think I've just had a fortunate series of events that allowed me to stay, in radio for 20 years. And now that those 20 years are done and things are at where they are.
And you've learned tons of stuff about the industry.
Yep.
Made a lot of connections.
Yep.
And then you started seeing a trend?
Yeah, I started, I remember the first couple of times I heard about podcasts, I thought it was one of the dumber words out there was podcast because, I mean, seriously, no one even owns an iPod anymore, right? Or they certainly don't listen to it if they do. But the name caught on, and for a while there, in fact, even when I was starting the company, I was trying to think of ways where we could, I know the president of, I believe it's the president of Audible, is also trying to get rid of the word podcast. But at some point,
let's do it right now.
At some point in time, I just said, no, we're just going to embrace it for now. We can fight that fight later. This is the battle I need to win now. We can win the war later. But when I heard about them and I kind of poo-pooed it a little bit. I'd been in classic traditional legacy radio for a long time. And so I just thought, well, what are these, podcasts about? And then, I started getting into a couple myself, some history podcasts, some comedy podcasts. And what I noticed was the trend within podcasts was kind of crappy audio. I mean, just a couple of people in their basement with blankets on the wall.
Seen those.
Yeah. And, or, for businesses that are trying to do it, they've got a big open conference room and they've got their USB mics and the content can be there. I mean, I listened to some podcasts that were of poor audio quality, but good content. And so all of that together kind of spurred this idea. Well, why do they have to be crummy sounding? Why does this have to be, amateur time? And it doesn't have to be. And there's so many good content creators out there that are just left in the ocean of bad podcasts.
Right.
And we thought, hey, let's get them in here. Let's get something going.
Right.
So
So how did you get the funding to get started?
Well, we got an SBA loan.
Okay, awesome.
And we put a little down on our house, and to make that down payment on it, and that our good faith side of it, and put a very thoughtful business plan together. I say very thoughtful because my wife put a lot of it in place as far as the financials. She's much better with the financial details than I am, and we just the bank just really liked the concept of what we were
Right.
putting together, because it really does feel like this is the time.
It
I
is.
mean, podcasts are
Yeah.
no longer this outlying thing. There's been a lot more research, a lot more valid research about podcast listeners, about their tendencies, and just how much of the population as a whole is getting into it. And what you find out is it's almost craft beer, right? Like I'm a big craft beer person, and one of the jokes we always say is there's no such thing as an ex-craft beer drinker. It's kind of the same with podcasts. Once people get into podcasts, they just get deeper and deeper into it. They don't pull away.
So before we get too far down this rabbit hole, tell us just very briefly, would you mind explaining exactly what Studio Americana does? Because we've touched on a few ways
Sure.
of how you came to it, but for those people out there who don't really know, what is Studio Americana then?
Studio Americana is an a la carte studio for podcasting, for live streaming, and for professional audio. I say about the only thing we don't do is music.
Well, we got to go.
I mean, we've definitely got the studio to record someone with an acoustic guitar, but I wanted to make sure that whatever we offered, we could offer in a professional way. And
Right.
I don't have a background in music production, so one of my producers does, and I think we might, dabble a little bit, but we're not looking to enter that market. The
Right.
market we're in is
You've
podcasts.
got a pretty big market as
Yeah.
it is.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about your market.
Yeah.
Because at Minibar, we were talking about not everybody is your market.
Right.
So were you able to kind of fine tune? Because Sarah and I do have our ideas of what your target market could be.
Yeah.
And when you start off, the whole content of Minibar for us was to have everybody focus in on who is the perfect customer for you.
Right.
Not just blanket it to everybody, because when you start talking to that perfect customer, when you identify who they are, then your marketing and your business starts growing fairly rapidly, because you're talking to the people that really need your services.
Right.
So were you able to kind of hone that in? Who would you say would be your perfect target?
Well, I think a communications professional at a nonprofit is probably, if I have to think of one person in mind, that's right now who I think of, because nonprofits have their own burden of a lot of nuance to whatever their issue is. And that's a really tough thing to get out in a email, in a Facebook post, in podcast, long form audio is engaging. And I think a lot of nonprofits need that engaging factor to gain donors, to keep donors informed on what they're doing, and to really get into the detail of what they do without people glossing over, again, a long Facebook screed or something like that. So that is, that's what I see right now as our primary customer. But number two, and not necessarily far below that, is independent small business owners, because they, again, I come from radio and TV. I know how much those ads cost. And if you can just curate a really good social media presence based on whatever you're already doing as a small business, and then you add this into that, you integrate podcasts or live streaming into that, boy, you are going to get a lot more bang for your buck.
Right.
So
One of the things that I wanted to know more than anything, what does your typical day look like?
my typical day right now is really getting used to being a salesperson, to be perfectly honest with you. Again, I think in 6 months, when we're more end to end, my typical day is going to be also as a salesperson, but then kind of directing our operations. But it's, it isn't yet as much studio as it is sales right now. It's going out there and reaching out to people, because it's such a new model. And it's not only a new business, it's a new model of a new business. And so getting that, explaining that to people, what it is and how it's beneficial to them. We've done some of the Facebook ads and things like that, but I find the most effective is really
face-to-face.
Face-to-face, yeah. Or at least face-to-face and then email to email at that point.
Right.
And following up. And, I'm not... my role in radio has been pretty much everything but sales. I've been everything from management to on-air to behind
now
the
you're
scenes.
the CEO, so
Yeah,
you're everything.
I'm everything, yep. And,
Yep.
and getting used to that has been... being a little more out there and hustling is just not
shaking hands, kissing babies.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I'm getting better at it every day, but that is my day to day, is learning what other people have been doing for many, many years.
Yeah.
So,
And how is you said I'm just going to jump back here
Yeah.
to the nonprofit target market. How are they embracing you at this point?
It's funny because we're just talking about how you do all these sales and you meet people and you get together. Right now, we're doing a 10-part series called Here to There. It's on the issue of commutes and transportation, how transportation works right now and where it's going to go in the future. Things like electric vehicles, automated vehicles, all that sort of thing. So that podcast came about because a friend of mine was at the legislature, at the Minnesota legislature, and someone who was a friend of his turned to him and said, "Do you know anyone that does podcasts?" And that's how that came about.
It's growing.
Yeah.
We just have to get your name out there a lot faster.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But here's the beauty of it. You're the only one that's doing it in the Twin Cities at a professional level.
Right. And I think that there's going to be, I don't know if I should say this as the person in my position, but I think there's going to be competition for this. But that is why we started out with what you see here. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, this would be 5 years down the road after there's already kind of an established model and then people start getting something nice. We wanted to come in with a commanding presence and say, look, we know what we're doing.
Yes.
We've got this idea thoughtfully crafted,
right.
and we're willing to put our money into it. Let's make this happen.
I love it.
I think you nailed it.
Thanks. Yeah.
So what advice would you give somebody who's thinking about podcasting or listeing to us and seeing us take the leap and saying, well,
Right.
if those ladies can do it, I think I can too.
Those yahoos are capable of
Yeah.
handling
What should
it.
they think about if this is something that is kind of been brewing in their soul?
Well, I think they, as far as what they should think about in putting together a podcast, is first and foremost, as I ask everybody, what is your goal? What is it that you would like to see at the end of this? Is it you would like to have more presence for your business? Is it that you would like to simply express these ideas and these things that are inside, and you want to share it with others and you want to collaborate with others on this? That's great. But I think step one is absolutely figuring out what your goal is. And then at that point, we sit down and, not necessarily on the air, but we sit down and we talk about, how long do you want it to be? Not only how long per episode, but how long do you want to do this for?
Yeah.
What is your primary audience? Because that can really determine how long of an episode you should have.
Right.
If you're going to people that really are already into podcasts, it doesn't really matter how long your podcast is. It could be an hour and a half long. I don't recommend longer than that, but it could be an hour and a half long. If you're looking for a more broad audience, if you're looking for to get your message out in doses, I'm a fan of the Commute podcast, which is 22 to 29 minutes.
Okay.
So, we sit down and we talk about things like that, and then
just trying to hone in on what your message is and what do you want to get out of it.
yeah,
is something
exactly. Because what we've set up here is you don't have to worry about any of the technical aspects of it. You don't have to worry about,
That's why I love this place.
Yeah,
Me too.
the
Me
equipment.
especially.
Yeah, yeah. It's that's the idea. Is if the content is there, we can work with all of that. And some people, it takes them a little while to get comfortable in front of the microphone. But especially if there isn't a video camera on them, they're pretty quick at getting to that. Right. So I think that's one of the first things I say is what is it that you really want to get out of this? Because we've got all the microphones, we've got all the the connections online,
beautiful.
we've got everything there. But what is it that you want to produce?
And it's like anything else, whether you're building a business or creating a marketing plan, or you have to have your end goal in mind
Yep.
and then figure out how you're going to get there and put in the steps.
And
then keep
constantly
going.
revisit it too.
Yeah.
You know, you get down the road a little bit and you say, okay, are we starting to veer away from what we intended to do?
Right.
And maybe you found a new aspect you hadn't even thought of before, and that is something to pursue. But you've got to continually go back and revisit that to make sure that what you're doing is the most effective for your purpose.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And that's something we didn't mention, our purpose of Idea2Launch.
Yeah, we should talk about you guys.
Okay, so Idea2Launch, we are here to empower the dreamers by helping them connect with, matchmaking them really with the resources they need to bring their ideas to life. That's really our purpose and our mission. And that's what brought us here today, is because we think by doing this, we can help them connect with additional resources and help them get their word out about what they've got going on.
I think we go even just a step deeper as well, and we help small businesses and entrepreneurs really transition to being full-on entrepreneurs and teaching them what do you do
Yeah, that
as
is
a
an
business
aspect,
owner?
isn't it?
What I mean, we train you how to own your business. I think is a big part of it. That could just be because that's my part.
Well,
That's what we do.
What
as
do
far
you
as I'm concerned.
what do you find to be the key component in that? I mean, what is it that we talked about, you know, how people start a podcast? What is it that people need to always have in mind when they're starting their own business?
My question, I guess, would be, what is your why?
Okay.
Because that will drive you through the tough times. So it's a roller coaster, and if you don't have your why embedded deeply within there and within your soul while you're doing this, it's going to be a challenging road for you. And that's where a lot of businesses, I think, falter, because that why just isn't hanging in there with them. Well,
So what is their motivation? I mean, what is it that distracts them away from the why?
sometimes it's that they don't start off with a why.
And I think that also, too, a lot of people they'll have this great idea and they're really passionate about it and they see the need and they want to do it and they get a few steps down the road and then they get stuck because they don't know what to do next.
Right.
Okay, now I'm here.
Or
and
it
I've got-
becomes overwhelming.
Yeah, exactly. So they get to this point where, hey, you know what? Like, I've got a business plan, I think, and I can tell that there's a need for this because everybody I talk to gets really fired up about it. And now what? Now I need money. Now I think I need to get some software developed. Now I think I need a storefront that's 4,000 square feet, which you don't right away. Us. So when I think so many startups get stopped and we end up with our wantrepreneurs, not our entrepreneurs, because they hit this roadblock of now what? And then they see the now what and they go, oh,
That's more than
oh,
I know
no,
what to do with.
I don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
And I certainly can't do that on my own, which is pretty true, which is why, too, I
In the startup community, if you are doing it all alone, you will fail. You
Yes.
need to surround yourself with a tribe, whether it's Idea2Launch or it's your friends and family or it's people that you network with. You better start surrounding yourself with a tribe of folks who can help you along the way, because it isn't a one-person job.
No.
And I can certainly relate to what it's like down the road a little bit when you've had the idea and you think at no point did I think, oh, there's going to be no problems, right? I mean, I knew enough to know that that's
Right.
not even possible. But the level of the toll that takes on you when you're in the midst of creating this new thing and you've
Right.
put your all into it already, and then you need more all than what you thought you already had.
Right.
I can see where that can, I'm sure I'll experience more of those in the near future. But that's a tough part to push through.
I think one of you mentioned that it doesn't matter about, well, we were talking about the why, but even if you have a strong why, if you are doing it by yourself, you're still going to
It's hard.
Yeah.
It'll take you.
see issues.
And there are probably a select few out there, and I'm sure that we'll have people say, I can do that, because that's mentally where I go. I'm like, I can do it by myself, because you just told me I couldn't, so here I go.
I know, I'm the same way.
and-
That's
I
why
think
we're together.
And to those people, I'll say, yes, you can. So it's fine, but it will be a smoother, more enjoyable, and much faster, more productive process when you partner with the right partners.
Yes.
Right. Well, and when, I don't care who you are. If you're one person, you have that one perspective, and you're going to miss things that are not in your scope of vision.
True story.
And again, I feel like when we started this, I was aware of that fact, but I don't know what's outside my scope of vision. I just know there are things outside of
Right.
there. And I've had to certainly rely on a lot of people and change my perception of some things, and, will continue to have to do that in the future. Oddly enough, there is a podcast out there called Startup Podcast. This guy who worked for This American Life on National Public Radio and then decided to start his own podcast media company, different than what we're doing here, but not entirely different. And apparently this came out in like 2014. He started the company Gimlet. And I just heard about this podcast while I was literally putting together my podcast studio. And it was
Cool.
a really, I keep using the term meta, listening to someone talk about starting up a podcast studio while I'm starting up a podcast studio. The guy who put this podcast together and put this company together did a fairly candid step by step of while he was putting this business together. I mean, it wasn't even complete when he started this podcast. It was about building it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really struck me from this conversation he had with one of these investors, with Chris Sacca, is Chris said that all the successful CEOs he works with are really odd people. They're not, in one way or another, they have some very abnormal characteristics. And although they're all, the codifying part is they're all very driven to do what they're doing, but that in the human psyche tends to create a few oddities among people. Is that something you guys see too as you're in successful entrepreneurs? Is there...
I can only speak for myself. Yes, I am.
Yes.
I mean...
I'm just like, they're one of us.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, and I think to your earlier point too, the comfort issue is most of us, I mean, just as human beings, we want to stretch as far as we're comfortable.
Yes.
And that means going to try to find a job that you like and getting into a career that suits you, and, making sure you have enough money to live and go on a few vacations.
Right.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's just, I kind of got to
It's
the point.
comfort.
It is.
And comfortable is okay.
yeah, absolutely.
But for the crazy ones, comfort is
Doesn't come naturally.
icky,
right.
right?
I'm
You're
not-
always pushing for that next thing and getting uncomfortable so that you can grow. Because when you're not growing, you feel like you're
Stagnant.
stagnant.
Yeah.
And what does Gary Vaynerchuk say? He said, the great motivation is you're going to die.
Yeah.
So you can
Yeah.
be comfortable, and that's your choice, and
Right.
that's great. Or you can see what you're made of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think, when I look back on, I mean, there's so many ways I would describe myself as weird, but, in that lack of comfort before, I've lived in a house, in a home now for 5 or 6 years. Prior to that, when I lived in apartments, I couldn't stand being in there for more than a year. I had to get out. I had to move to a new apartment. I've had a good number of jobs in my career as well. Only one of them I wasn't even fired. I was laid off during like the recession. I lost a radio job at that point, but yeah, I hope that bodes well for this company, because I need to keep this one going for many, many years. But
I think you're on a really good track.
yeah, I don't like being stagnant. I don't like being comfortable, and I mean, I like being comfortable, but I don't like being in a rut. So,
Where you're not pushing yourself
Yeah.
and seeing what you're
because I always feel there's more in there.
Yeah.
I'm always,
There
there's
always is,
Yeah.
which is incredible. Why don't you do your number, your phone number, your
Oh,
website?
sure. We're studioamericana.com. We're Studio Americana on the Instagram, on the Twitter, on the Facebook, on everything. And you can always call me. I love that.
What's your number?
612-272-7970. Not after midnight, please.
Oh, you shouldn't have said that.
Yeah. I just muted. It's fine. But yeah. And right now it's me, and we've got Branson, who's running the board and the controls right now. And
Awesome.
She's fabulous.
yeah, she is. She's been great to work with.
Thank you, Branson.
And,
Yes, we appreciate it.
and so, but we're planning to grow and
And let's talk a little bit about this studio that you found
okay.
over here.
Oh yeah, this is now. I don't know it's this room or the room on the other side, but this used to be, it's been several radio stations. This is a former radio station building. It was KQRS for a long time,
Yep.
up until the late 90s. So Tom Bernard was either in this studio or the one next to us. Then it was a Catholic station for 10 years, and it was a Spanish station, and then it was a vacant building for a little bit.
Okay.
And that is where my connections came into play, and
Awesome.
someone pointed me to it, and I took a tour and said, I think there's something we can do here.
Right.
So, yeah. So it's
It's a great space. I love it.
Yeah, it's really nice. I'm really happy with it.
No, but
So-
thank you so much.
Thank you.